We'll call the meeting to order. It's October 9th, 2013, and 5:05 p.m. And adjustments to the agenda. Just one item, 6.1, very, very short discussion about substitute teacher rates. Are there any other adjustments?
It's not substitute teacher rates, it's paras.
I'm sorry. Well, we'll add that as well. It's just a quick note. In paras, 6.1.
Act 156.
6.2, Act 153, 156, paras. Sorry about that. Anything else? What I'd like to do is welcome some board members and administrators from Addison Central Supervisory Union, and they're here to observe our carousel meeting. So, Mark Perrin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Or not.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Just briefly, we're going to be having our first carousel meeting next Wednesday. And we did a little research ahead of time, and this is a model that we feel we want to follow. So we thought it would be appropriate to kind of crash your board meeting tonight. And we have some folks from the central office, Carol Fenimore, Vicki Wells, and Peter Burrows, Superintendent, Special Services Associate Superintendent, and a couple of board members from our elementary schools and the SU, Lorraine Morris and Suzanne Duff. And I'm the SU board chair and represent the high school as well on that. So thanks for having us, and we look forward to how you function tonight.
Thank you. It's a long evening, so help yourself to some food in the back.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're glad to have you here, and feel free to ask board members questions as we're transitioning around 7 o'clock.
Great, thank
That'd be
you.
great. Audience and communications, Mr. Lax, I believe you wanted to speak to the board?
Yes, I do. Good evening, Tim Laux from Falls Road in Shelburne. I know you're about to embark upon the development of the budget for 2014-2015, and I wish you luck in that process. I think I'd applaud the board on the transparency of the entire process, and I think what's online available for all the constituents in terms of expenses has been great. However, there's really no view of a balance sheet perspective, and I think most of us would agree that we've got a crisis that's looming on the horizon that has been brewing for quite some time. It's not going to get fixed tonight. It's not going to get fixed tomorrow. It's not going to get fixed this year probably, and that is the underfunding of the retirement system and the healthcare system for all the employees in the district. Unfortunately, the unions, the supervisory unions, I don't think have the wherewithal and capability to fix that on their own. Our legislature, all due respect, John, does not seem to have the stomach to go ahead and address this issue. And I know that the first way for this to get resolved, it's not going to get resolved unless people are made aware of the issue. I think it would be very appropriate to include a one-page summary that makes all the taxpayers knowledgeable and aware of what the unfunded burden could be, both on a per student, per employee, and on a prorated per taxable dollar income. That should also, I don't have all the details. I'd be glad to go ahead and discuss a couple of ideas, but I think it should include some key assumptions of what the rates of return are for the fund, and also should show some historical return rates so that to make sure that taxpayers know that the assumptions going forward are consistent with prior performance. As I said, I think it could be relatively simple, could be kept to one page, and I think it would be a real wake-up call to everybody so that we can collectively get our hands around this very significant issue.
Without diving deeply into a big discussion at this point, just for reference, we're aware of the state situation. I'd let our CFO respond briefly, and then we'll move on and we'll take note. I think that's an important point. People will want to know because it's a hot topic in the news. Bob, did you want to say anything?
If you leave me your name, phone number, email address, whatever it is that you'd like the information forwarded to, I can get you what is available, but I'll bring to your attention that the obligations for retirement are funded through the Vermont teachers' retirement or Vermont municipal's retirement. So any statement as to underfunding or equity would have to be at that level. There is no account for that these people around the table manage. Healthcare is provided through the Vermont Educational Health Initiative, And so again, the statement would have to be their financial position, not necessarily the Shelburne boards or the CSSU boards. But I can get you what we've got available.
I understand, but you're not telling me the taxpayers of New York are going to pay for it?
The taxpayers of New York? No, I haven't mentioned New York yet. If I figure out a way that they would foot the bill, we'll be there tomorrow.
But we collectively are on the hook, and I guess this whole issue of awareness is really the key one. Maybe it would probably make sense for me to stop by and say.
I'll get you what we have.
Okay, great.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
your time.
Laux, appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
It's a good point. Other comments, so forth? Okay. Any other communications that we need to be aware of? Okay. 4.0 presentations. This is when we're going to start diving into our CSSU budget and purchase services. 4.1. So, Mr. Mason, that's your show.
Thank you very much.
And you have materials in your packet related to Bob's.
I think you all have this presentation. I don't think we collectively made any changes since you got it. So I'll walk through it. Not much is different from prior years. We still break the entire organization you've got into core services and purchase services. And this is the purchase service list that we're going to touch on tonight, just to provide an overview of what it is we do in each of those categories and the resources that are directed there. So I'll move right to the next slide, information technology. First on the list is the equipment side of technology, not technology education. It's Mike Cantor, the network administrators, and the technicians supporting each of our schools. We don't anticipate any staffing, and as last year, we're going to sort those costs out by ADM. Questions on technology? Seeing none. CY Connecting Youth. I need to spend a minute here because there is a change. It is still Christine, the SAPs in monitoring. You as a board collectively spent a lot of time last fall and last winter discussing changes to the SAP methodology of assessing costs. We are moving there this budget year. We're going to, we had already in 13-14 changed to record all revenue expense on your financial statements. Prior to that, you only recorded the generous contribution you as a CSSU board made to that activity. And then this year, we're going to include all that revenue and expense and then allocate the costs based on services provided in each school. So each school will see their assessments change. We provided you a rough look at those sorts of changes last year by recasting the 13-14 budget in these new numbers. And we're going to do that as part of this budget process. Questions? I'm going to do that all again.
Well, I'm drawing a blank on this. Wasn't this some we were talking a lot about with the consolidated health program? So some of this money was not going to be just, I mean, SAP counselors, I understand, but.
Yes, there is a body of work that's down here, 2, 3, some number of years. It says we're relooking at coordinated school health and how CY connects into that new responsibility and activity. Mm-hmm. Megan's leading that charge, but doesn't have anything that's relevant to changing the approach to budgeting for 14-15.
So is all of CY going to be causal this year? Is that what you're saying?
Is all of CY going to be
Causal? Like this is the SAP person at CVU? Or is there some effort that's common that's getting allocated on ADM or something?
yes to everything you just said?
Okay.
There, at about a 5,000 foot level, we're going to work with Christine as we did last year to partition the services provided and where they line up specifically by sort of the person delivering those services. Then we'll add their salary and benefits costs to some order of support that they need and bill that to the school that they're resident in. Some other activities, particularly the best example is Christine's leadership of the whole group, needs to be allocated across all the schools, and we've come up with a way to do that as well.
And I think you're referencing our discussion about, is it ADM K-8, or where's the difference?
No, I just thought that I just know the finances were so complex with all the grants and everything else going in that it was really hard to untangle and make it very clear by school who was paying for what. So I thought that was the work that was going on, and I just drew a blank on it already being done, so.
Let me take a journey for you all on the
If it's only
5
me.
meetings you spent last year, because you did do that. At first, you looked at CY in the November timeframe and wanted to look at different ways to take $10 and sort it amongst you, so we looked at different ADM models. You adopted something down the middle that was most pleasing to most board members around and not so burdensome to the one board member who didn't want to see the additional charges. And then in that conversation mentioned you'd like to see if we could look at all the services and all the costs delivered by a services provided model. We said we would. We shared that all with you in the early, like February, April, March, somewhere in their time frame, and everybody seemed to be okay. It could have been that given other things on their horizon, the attention was elsewhere. But, so we said we would incorporate it this year. So we're incorporating it in this year. We're not adding any cost, we're just divvying it up amongst you people around the table a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay, on CY. Food service, I have nothing new to report in food service. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the budget at CSSU includes the food service directors, all employees at CVU and all but one at Williston. The rest of the employees are still within the schools. We don't anticipate any staffing increases, and all costs needed in support of a particular school are divvied out to that school in the end. So this is strictly on a services basis. And if you wonder why one person in Williston has gone left and everybody else went right, she has that right as they used to be in a union, or they elected to either stay in the union or move to CSSU. She elected different than everyone else. Okay, on food service. Transportation, unchanged from prior years. Reminder, it's Ken Martin, Pat Ward, our maintenance supervisor, and all the bus drivers in each of your schools. It supports all but Charlotte pre-K-8. They contract out to Betcha Transit. We don't anticipate any significant changes, and splits are based on the hours of services necessary to provide what your building principals have asked for.
We had a conversation at one point about a position that was going to be a bookkeeper for transportation, for lack of a better description, which I don't believe was ever filled.
Correct.
Is that now out of the baseline, not going to be asked for? Is that done?
That's a conversation of historical interest only. I won't see that appear anywhere ever again in my life. Have I been clear? And gone.
That sounds final.
Moving on. CISEI.
Children's Integrated Services Early Intervention.
Can you say that louder? I'm sorry. What?
Children's Integrated Services Early Intervention.
Thank you.
It's providing services to children in your communities aged birth to 3. You have 2 tremendous people on staff doing that for each of your schools. We split their costs based on the number of students served. And I give you a heads up that changes are in the wind. We do not understand the implications of being in compliance with those changes. As soon as we do, we will let you know. But likely what we're budgeting for 14-15 will have some changes when Megan and I finally understand what compliance on July 4th, 2014 really means. And
When you say changes, you mean increases?
I don't know. The law has, and you tell me when I start to get into trouble, but the law has shifted responsibility from schools to other providers in the community of these sorts of services, and the law hasn't yet pinned down where the money went. As soon as we understand both responsibilities and money, we'll know what we're going to do. We're hopeful that the money is going to be delivered to those who provide the services. But,
That's accurate.
okay? So we just leave that as an open, because we're gonna come back to you on that, but it probably won't be until after you've finished your budgets. This is a 2-employee group. It's a relatively small level of cost once it's parsed out to the K schools. Psychological services unchanged, other than the names might have changed since the last chart. And we do split all those services based on schools requesting those days of services. Occupational therapy, sort of the same way as the prior slide. Yes, Joan?
One quick question back on psychological services. Are those testing services only? Is it a broader umbrella for psychological services that's changed here and there?
Broader umbrella. They provide a variety of services, including assessment for students with disabilities, but also team consultation and a variety of different things. Happy to talk further about that at some point if you want more detail. But
Okay, thanks, good.
Occupational therapy, same kind of drill. English language learners includes these 5 people providing services across our schools. Those of you who've been here for a number of years know that whatever you budget won't be what we finally deliver, because the door is open and we take kids in and let kids out. And so Molly does an artful job trying to keep an eye on who came in and who left and where the services are needed, and tries to keep everybody happy. Some days more happy than others.
So given the flow, how do you budget for that for each school? 3-year running average, or what is how are you putting that into our baseline?
Well, I'll answer it, then you tell me whether I'm right.
Take a stab.
We staff level based on the services that we expect we'll need. I don't know as we add numbers to next year with that staffing level. So it's basically the people on board today, and then we try and balance those people where the services are. It's a question of Williston found 4 more and Shelburne had 4 less. But if we're providing services to a far larger number of people come September 2014, you'll see that when Molly says, I need to add a 0.5 FTE ELL to support children in these 2 schools.
And if I remember, we added like 0.2 FTE for Shelburne, but it came through the SU board only because they're employed at the SU, but billed back to Shelburne. Kristen?
Correct.
So if your needs change during the year, if you need less, are you still paying for that level that we budgeted? So if we're told we need, so if you saw a family move out.
I'd say you needn't worry, because your building principals are pretty good at when they need less service, they make sure they're getting less of a bill. We aren't as disciplined to go the other direction when someone needs another day, actually paying for it quickly. So, but the dynamic works out, we move the dollars quickly. And I don't think we've ever gone through a year where we needed less staff than we had. The numbers haven't ever gone down collectively year to year to year in my tenures.
Right. Right now, we're on a tremendous curve upward. So we'll see how we do. I'm about to do the numbers and the shuffle. You're going to lose a significant family. Heinsberg's going to gain them. So we will bill differently according to the day the ELL teacher moves to the place of higher need.
KNELL. Early Learning Partnership. This, I think, remains unchanged relatively near term.
Yeah.
It's a program covering services to strengthen preschools in your local community. You act as conduit to get money from the state education fund to those preschools who are worthy of having that money attached to them as tuition relief or improvement in the program. There's 2 components to the ELP budget. There's a CSSU budget that covers the operating costs of the whole program and the resources to make sure it's run well. And then the cost reflecting payments to families or preschools are all at the local level. So we have a disciplined approach to carving out the number of kids that might be eligible for the program for the 14-15 year and building a budget based on that. I hesitated at the beginning because this is also likely to change. We don't think in 14-15, but there's a significant body of law that got close to being passed this past year. It likely will be passed this next session, and we'll have to see what impacts are there and what timeline they have.
But because of our enrollment and engagement with the program, we will be less affected than districts that have to start anew.
Correct. They're going to tweak some numbers for us. In other SUs, it's starting from zero.
Yep.
I think that, this is the slide that you're going to focus on in each of your local boards. You need to, by some sense of unanimity, decide you're in or you're out where the X's are, and let us know quickly if you're getting bus service somewhere else for next year. Okay, Al?
Well, I just looked February, March, April, I can't find anything in our meetings on that, so if someone could just send me the CY, whatever data was reviewed on how we're divvying it up, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Because I think
It was, we were in central office when we had that discussion.
so maybe it just didn't get posted. See, I thought that there was work being done after the budget, that's why I just never, I don't recall ever hearing it closed, that's all. And is this the part where, David, where like, we ended up taking half of the hit because it was a big reallocation?
That was during the budget time,
So
yes.
we'll get the whole change this
It's an
year?
example of how your other board members were very sensitive.
I appreciate that.
Board and
Or I was persuasive, it's one of the two.
incredible volatility.
And Jean, you aren't getting the whole, because that was
Oh, I know,
a
yeah, it was like
transition
7
year.
through, I think we went to 7-12 or something, I just.
Bob, what is FIT?
That's CSSEI in an older name. This is Family Infant Toddler. The state has changed this column to read CISEI.
Okay.
Okay? So Mr. Mason will correct that in next year's version of your matrix. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, one last slide. This is your budget process for this year. You're going to review an anticipated list of decision packets and foreign purchase services at your next meeting. You have a budget meeting on November 20th, and then a final meeting on December 18th to adopt the budget. Okay.
Questions for Bob? And just a reminder that our common topic for the November meeting, we're going to do health insurance and
ACA,
ACA.
American Care Act.
Okay, so we're at 5.0, reports to the board, and 5.1, the central office leadership team report. Elaine?
So you probably noticed in my COLT report that there was a piece on calendar 2014-15. And in that little piece, it said that there are several variables to our calendar, and including the start and end date, the number of breaks, length of these breaks, and implementation date. And at a meeting of the regional superintendents yesterday, they did vote to table 2014-15 as an implementation date. Continue the conversation around the relationship between time and learning, and start engaging the tremendous outreach that we've had from the community around this into a conversation around, okay, so how do we provide a better structure that meets the needs of our kids? So there will be a press release on that after the last forum. So there's a forum tonight in Burlington, and there's a forum tomorrow night at CDU right here. I hope many of you will come. And that will be announced at the front end of the forum, but we want to make sure that we engage the community and hear everything they have to say. But thought you'd want to know, and I'm sure even today I've been hearing buzz from different people that they already knew. Also, I wonder, Molly, could you say a little bit about the work that you're doing in science? I know we've had the science kneecaps, but also you're doing some really good work in curriculum with science that the board might be interested in hearing a little bit about.
Sure. You might have noted in your packet is a 3-year science work plan. And that work plan is related to new science standards that have just come out. Here they are, nice and fat and technical. Just adopted by Vermont this fall. So the timing is a little tricky because we're in the middle of working on Common Core. And so the pressure around these, while great, I'm trying to monitor and be careful of for our teachers. So this plan that you probably saw notes that this current year, we're going to model ourselves after what we did with the Common Core, which is to study first and not get everybody in a hairball. So there are, from every school, 2 science lead representatives on an SU-wide committee. We have 2 amazing science consultants from VSI leading some of those meetings. I'm leading some. They're much better than I am. I'm all ears, but they're there for part of them. And basically, we're going into a deep study of these and figuring out by the end of our school year this year more about implementation and rollout to our faculties, what that should look like, how we might map these out by grade level, K-12. We have some very eager teachers who have already contacted me, how can I get these, how can I be involved? And I've said, here you go right ahead. But as an SU, we are absorbed in a study right now. And basically, this plan that you saw maps out how next year we'll think about rolling this out to people and just begin to tap into some curriculum planning. And then the following year, we'll really delve into that deeply. So while we're on the topic of science kneecap, I might as well go there with you, and that too I encapsulated for you. So I won't read it all, I just want to highlight a couple things, and that is that we not only surpassed the state with our science results, but we really outperformed them in several areas. 4th grade fell across the state, and we too did, but at the same time, we were, 18 percentage points above where the state is for 4th grade. Our 8th grade, for the 6th consecutive year, has done nothing but rise. And at this point, we are 25 percentage points above the state performance level. So that's a great thing to know about. I also want to make mention of 2 other areas where we've had significant growth. One is our students living in poverty that we've been working so hard on, and in fact, we're seeing some great improvements there in science, which is not an easy thing if students are behind to steadily catch up in. So that's a significant finding for both 4th and 8th grade. And the same is true for students on IEPs. So we're really pleased that some of our focus in those areas is proving itself here. I think I'll stop there.
Nice work, Molly.
Well, not me.
Can I ask
Thank
one,
you.
can I ask one question? Was there, you said 18% increase or above the state average? I assume when we get the data, it'll show how many do perform proficient with distinction. I know our 4th grade had 0.
Yeah.
So I wonder too, even with the 8th grade, it's, we want them all to be proficient, but we also want the percentage
Right.
who are achieving higher
Yeah.
to improve.
And
I
I
was
think-
I was really shocked when I saw the 4th grade number, 0.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And in fact, Armando Villaseca, when he announced scores, he does this whole public thing, and then the portal opens for the public to look at. He made mention of 4th grade all over the state having dropped significantly, and what that could be attributed to, and our students were no different. Even though they score higher than the rest of the state, we fell as well. And he pointed again, which we've looked at every single year that I've been here anyway, to the inquiry aspect of the test, which is very challenging and will continue to be, especially as we implement these. So he pointed to that, and those are the most challenging problems on the test. And our 4th graders are brand new to the test, so every year they're certainly far behind the 8th graders who have had years to practice. But yeah, that is concerning. You will, though, to answer your question, in report outs at your locals, I don't think it's tonight, but at another point, hear specifically about your range. When I report out on SU, I look at proficiency and above proficient and glom it all together when I talk to you about it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other calls?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Can you remind me a little bit in the technology audit as
Sure.
to what
It's on the agenda.
Oh, Sorry.
It's coming up like two more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, don't lose the question. The CSSU AYP plan?
So this is, I just want to take a moment, this could have been in the kudos section, but it is also an information piece. At this point, all of our schools, except for Charlotte, are identified for AYP. This year, I got letters from the commissioner secretary commending us, though, on recognition for continuous improvement for both Charlotte and Shelburne for scoring 15 to 20% above state average in math and reading. For Williston, for increasing by 10% in math subgroups. And for Williston, they are third best in the state for closing the gaps. So whereas most of the people in the state are increasing the gap, there's a small group of schools, like 8 to 10 schools, and Williston is the third best of that. And really quite an impressive closing of the gap. And CVU that didn't make AYP last year did make it this year. They're still identified because you have to have 2 years of making progress in order to not be identified. But I thought that was important for you guys to know.
So I imagine board members will want that information. Can you like send us
Sure.
an email or
Yep.
post it or put it in our packet
I
for
can
next
put it in the
month?
packet next month, just
Okay.
FYI.
5.4, the technology audit, Elaine?
Okay, so,
So
I,
5.3 is gone. Did I miss that?
Say that again?
There is no 5.
Oh,
There's
I'm
no
sorry,
facilities.
that was a ghost.
it was a ghost, we're not, none of us are sure exactly how that ended up, but maybe it's, should be on somebody else's, agenda, and when
So
you
you-
get there, you'll have to add it.
Yeah, 5.3, there is no 5.3.
So technology audit, I put out an RFP to 5 vendors, including 3 in-state vendors and 2 national vendors, heard back from all of them, had some very, very good proposals, very different proposals, convened the technology integration specialists and Mike Canfor and Molly to review these, developed a rubric to decide who to go with, and in the end, decided to go with Sandy Latham and Carol Vallet, who are in-state University of Vermont people. Very, very thorough proposal. And in fact, I mean, we made this decision on a Tuesday morning, and by Thursday, I had the email from Sandy saying, can we meet next Wednesday? Already, we've had the meeting the next Wednesday where they've met with the tech integration team and Molly and me and Walter and, done all of this. And yesterday, from them, the Google Drive with all of the information and what they're collecting, and really, I'm so impressed with the work that they're doing already. And I also really am impressed with the technology integration team. They're being asked to share a lot of information, and they are being so supportive and really helping to work with this. So you probably noticed in the little blurb that I wrote that I don't anticipate this year that there be a decision packet for technology, and that's because the audit will not be completed in time. If there are things that come up in the recommendations that could be, well, like if you did less of this and more of this, and those are easy swaps, of course we would do those things. But in terms of the big picture conversation that we were having last year about whether or not we need an educational technology director at the SU, that will not be answered in time for this year's budget. Yes,
So
Kathy.
that kind of leads into my question and gives me a partial answer. What is the goal of the technology audit?
So-
When you went out for RFP, what did you ask for?
So did you remember seeing the RFP? So there are 5 areas. 5.
We just a background, last year during our budget discussions.
Yep.
There was initially a request for more support for technology. And what
Okay.
we wanted to do as a board is have a better understanding of what's actually going on.
In each school?
So in each school
Yeah.
across the SU
Okay.
and the SU in 5 categories, and I'm not sure if I'm going to remember all the categories, but teaching and learning, integration of technology, support for the different kinds of technology that we use to just run our schools. Infrastructure, and in every one of these areas, how are we doing in comparison to each other? Are we all moving forward in the same kind of way, even if it might be a little different? Can we anticipate that when kids get to 9th grade at CVU, that the CVU teachers can expect that all kids have a certain basic flexibility and facility with using technology?
So it's
we're ask-
within the CVU, within the CSSU, not pulling in, how do we compare with other SUs across the nation?
Exactly, we're not
Okay.
looking beyond, we're just looking within our own. Now, the advantage of having somebody in state do this is that they've done this work with other people. So they have that sense, and they bring that to the table. That was one of the things that we looked at in deciding who to select.
And so you don't anticipate it for this time next year, the result, but afterwards, so it would go into the next year's
Right.
budget?
We expect the results by the end of January, which is too late for this budget cycle.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
I will send all board members the RFP that I put out, because actually, there's some really good questions there that will really frame it for you, so that when we have the next conversation,
That would be great, thank you.
I'll resend that.
Thanks.
And you had, you and Kevin had served on a committee that was looking at a data management system.
We had one meeting, and that is as
Yeah.
far as it went.
Yeah.
That was
So-
tabled.
Just a reminder that we want to keep you in the loop.
I'm very interested in if that gets started up. What's that?
You're as in loop as there is to be in.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, thank you.
Okay, 5.5, legislative breakfast, it's on there just as a reminder that, first of all, I apologize, I typed out an email to send you, and it sat on my desktop and I never hit send, so you'll get something from me tomorrow. But team of people that are going to work on that, you can work remotely for the most part, but the idea just tonight is get a sense that we should do this in January. And Joan, you're nodding yes, and others, you're ready to go forward with this in January. So those of you who have an interest in helping pull that together, you'll have an opportunity to do so. And those of you who just want to make sure that we have certain questions or topics that are brought forward, you'll have the opportunity to do that as well. So I apologize again, I didn't send an email to you, and I will do that. So 6.0 discussion matters. 6.1, the substitute teacher rate, just a brief note that we had it on our agenda last month. We felt that we needed some more information. So we'll get more information and we'll revisit this in November. Okay, it's not going, or possibly November. The policy.
I don't know that we would be ready in November.
Okay.
As stated in the report, we got conflicting feedback from all the boards, so Bob and I scrapped the assumption of an increase for next year, and we've left the rate at $80 for this year. And we're meeting with the principals about it on Monday, next Monday, and we won't know which direction we're going in yet.
Okay, so the point being is that we talked about it last month, it hasn't disappeared, we'll revisit it. That's all we know at this point. And 6.2, just a very, very brief discussion about paraeducators and whether we do the hiring at the CSSU level or move it to the district level, or keep it at the district level. And it's related to legislation where, we talked about moving our professional educators to the SU. We need to do that. And Megan, I'll let you explain.
So as Colleen said, the law requires that we move all licensed staff to the SU as of July 1st, 2014. But what the law left in your hands is the decision as to whether or not paraprofessional, so unlicensed special education support staff, move from being building employees to being SU employees. So that decision lies with you. Our recommendation as an administration is that paras remain employees at the building level and that they not be shifted to the SU. There's a number of reasons for that. The most important one in our minds is that many of our paraprofessionals have a blended funding. They're used partially in special education and partially in non-special education, either providing 504 services or in some cases lunch duty. It would make it very complicated for us to continue to have that flexibility if they were moved to the SU. And buildings wouldn't have the ability to shift staff and shift assignment in a really clean way. So that's the primary reason. There are a number of other reasons more related to many of our paras work in their building because they're very tied to their building. Their kids go to school. They don't really have a desire to work elsewhere in the SU. So there's a lot of sort of people reasons why, but primarily that's why our recommendation would be that the board not move paras over to the SU.
It's an SU decision.
It's an SU decision. Those of you who want feedback from your other board members, feel free to do that. We're not making a decision tonight, but wanted to be apprised of it because hopefully we can vote on it next month. Russ.
So, if I understand correctly, this is left out of the legislation. Do we know if it was intentional, unintentional?
It wasn't left out of what was clarified in the miscellaneous ed bill
Yeah.
at the end of last year was leaving the decision in your hand.
Okay.
In your hands. The original legislation
The original
Had
legislation
had
says
everyone moving.
special education staff
Correct.
without differentiating professional from
But we
non-professional
don't think they're gonna go back and fix a mistake. I mean,
No, it's
it
definitely-
seems-
that was
it seems
very-
deliberate at this point.
Yes, that came
Very.
out of the statewide working group that looked at various implementation components of Act 153, and that was a very strong recommendation to choose one way or the other.
So doing it otherwise would be an accounting nightmare.
Correct.
And the VSBA has a legislative report, May 28th. I'll pass it around if you want to look at it. Megan pointed this
Yep.
to me yesterday. So if you, just the summary of that in it, the miscellaneous bill just specifically speaks to parent educators.
So, just one last question. Rough percentage of the total special ed budget, what does this comprise, the para?
Bob, we can get that for you.
37.3%.
Excellent.
Do you believe him?
I
never do.
About 75% of your budget is in personnel.
Yeah.
And maybe half of that is in para costs, because there's a lot more paras, but they're a lot less money.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually, that was,
Cindy thinks she's got a better number.
I don't have a better number, it's not 50%.
It's less than 50%.
It's less
just to
than
follow on the
50%.
financial.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're gonna get tonight.
I just have to follow, maybe your question's the same as mine. So the funding for the paras, the special ed funding for the paras, will that be in the local building budgets now, or is that somehow get billed back to CSSU? The special ed funding that the paras are,
If you elect to leave paras where they are today,
Yep.
your budgets locally will remain unchanged. It will reflect the paras, a record of employment in your schools and all their costs associated with it.
so the special ed, like matching kind of funding for special ed would go to the local buildings?
It does today, yes.
And it wouldn't come to CSSU, and that's okay with the legislature?
I had a similar question related to, and we may need to better understand it, so when there's the special ed audit that happens to see how people spend their time, or the service plans that go out in the fall for the next year, how does the money move around?
Have in your mind that nothing changes as it is today. We do all those time studies locally by employee with the work that they do. We submit revenue reimbursement locally based on costs for kids served locally. So that's one of the few things that I can say is probably going to be the same that you've been used to. And service plans are all developed locally. So
For everybody or just for paras?
for everybody with the exception of professional employees on July 1 next year, will change the color of their check from a local school to CSSU.
Yeah, I understand
And
that.
then Cindy, Megan, and Bob and Mike will work a ton of magic to get all that money, dollar for dollar, back in the right place and not compromise any revenue that was associated with it.
And that would be the concern, because it's such a big shift to how to explain it to communities, the different budgets, yeah. Other questions related to this? If you have questions, you can send them to me and I'll direct them out, and if we can, put this as an action item next month. If we need to wait on it, I suppose we can. So 7.0, action matters. 7.1, award the audit contract. And Bob, do you want to help us with that?
Sure.
I'm sorry, we need a motion to,
Should we
excuse
postpone or
me.
table?
I need to get to my issue.
The motion on last month's material, because you tabled this from last month, would have been to award the bid to low bidder Fothergill, Segali, and Valley in an amount of $231,100. If you want to start
Do you
there,
need a
that would
motion
be
to
great.
untable? Is that what you need first?
Well, we just postponed it, we can just move
Good.
it forward, we don't need to
Good.
untable it. So, need a motion to award the, Joan, is there a second? Okay, now discussion. And some of the discussion that we had at the board chairs meeting, and we had it at this meeting here. And Russ, do you want to speak to this?
Well, just whether it, my feeling is that it would be prudent to change. We've had Fothergill for, 8, 10, 12 years. And that, our fiduciary responsibility, periodically, we should change that. I think we talked last time about whether there was any way to get, one of the other bidders closer to the 231. I don't know, Bob, whether you've been able to look at that and whether there is any possibility of doing that, but like I said, my feeling is that we should make a change.
Kristen, did you want to say something too?
I agree with that. It'd be nice if it was the same amount of money, but I think $10,000 over a course of 4 years, just to make sure, not thinking, again, that there's anything amiss, but to have a different perspective and different eyes looking on it, even understanding that it will require additional staff time because, they've never been in our buildings and in our books before. But I think as fiduciaries, it is important that we take this small step to make sure everything is as good as it can be.
Did anyone else want to add to this discussion? Dave?
The contract, the proposal, which is $10,000 less, is a main company, if I'm remembering this correctly.
Second place
Yes.
bidder, yes.
Yeah, second place bidder is a main company. So if we were to do this, we would be sending the work out of state.
Well, and then the question is, do we have to do a second request for proposal, or can we just act on what's been presented?
I am not a lawyer, so I won't advise you on the legality of what you're about to consider. But normally I would counsel you to be respectful of the public bid process. If you submit a bid to multiple people and ask them to bid to win your business, it's disingenuous, is that the right word, to then turn around and ignore it and go with a low bidder, or go with a high bidder. But I don't know of any jail you're gonna be in by doing that, other than you probably won't get the other two firms to bid on your business in the future.
Could you say that again, Bob? What?
That's assuming that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, Russ and then you, Kathy.
I just would like to hear Bob say that again, because I didn't grasp everything he was saying about what piece of that was disingenuous?
Going with the highest bidder after a public bid process, which is is what you, I think I just heard someone wanted to understand whether they could do that.
So we have 3 bids. The
Yes.
low bid was Fothergill, Segali, and Valley at $231,100. The second highest bid was R.H.R. Smith and Company out of Buxton, Maine, and that was David's concern, and they were $241,600, so $10,500 difference. And then the third bid is from Sullivan Powers and Company out of Montpelier. Their bid is $256,200, which is $25,000 more, and it's a Vermont company. And so,
I have a good question, and then I'll.
and
So-
Kathy?
My question is, in that RFP, did we state that the lowest bid would be the one that we chose?
No, you have legally covered that with your entitled per your public bid document to pick any and all bidders or no bidders at your desire. So you're not gonna be in legal problems. It's, when we do a public bid process, for example, this limitation to firms in Vermont, bidders normally like to hear that before you put out the bid, not after you've got the results in. So likely if I award, or if you award it to Vermont, Sullivan, and ignore R.H. Smith, I'll probably get a call from Mr. Smith indicating, that wasn't really fair, and I'll deal with that. But I mean, that's why I say it's not legal, it's just the process of putting up public bids. You like to do them clean and clear from the beginning.
And I can't imagine to pay $25,000 more. That seems like a big jump. And I think, trying to buy locally is good, but,
So Eric and then David, I think.
Yeah, I was going to agree with sort of the notion that I don't really have a problem with out of state, particularly if we invite them to the process. So I'm in agreement with Russ in terms of the importance of having a change from time to time, and I don't have a problem with the main.
David, did you want to say something?
Phil wanted to say something.
My arm is enough one. I'm very sensitive to having new eyes look at our whole financial package. I've been on the audit committee for many, many years, 10 years maybe or more, and I've seen the folks at Fothergill, Segali, and Valley probe so thoroughly and so professionally that I don't have that question or the have some other eyes look at this. There's not many firms in or out of state in New England that can do the level of analysis that we require in our district. So just a different perspective from my eyes of having been with them for a long time. And I know that when we had a firm before them, the chaos is too strong. The amount of low-level disruption, well, no, disruption's okay, but unorganized way of probing our records was very difficult for our central office. We're much better off than we were then, even within our own staff, but just another side. I mean, I think it's good to have this conversation, but just another side of having no concerns about them missing something from our books.
I don't think that, I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think that the people who have spoken out in favor of this are questioning at all, the work that Fothergill has done for us. I think it's more a question of principle or best practice that periodically you change that up. So it's not a reflection by any stretch of the imagination, for me personally, of the work that they've done. And I've been on the audit committees before well. So,
Now, has anyone not spoken to it who wants to?
Nothing new, but I feel like when you put out a bid, that you should up front delineate what the parameters are, what you're looking for. And if we want somebody, a Vermont accounting firm to take over, I think we should have that. We should make that clear. And I also think that it's probably good financial practice to take the lowest bid. That's really what part of the bidding process is all about. So my recommendation is that we wait, somebody here has to remember for 4 years in advance now, that in the beginning of FY17, the next time we put out a bid for an auditor, that we remember that we prefer to keep our business local, and maybe tell Father Gill, you know, you've been great, but we're going to look for something else, just to reiterate how close we're doing this. So.
at least we wouldn't be sending them to Texas.
Well-
Did anyone, what's the question that's on the table is whether or not we award the bid to Father Gill Segali and Valley for $231,100. That's what the question on the table is point. So, did anyone else want to speak to this?
Yeah. Just a quick question. Do we know if the main company has done business with other Vermont districts?
The criteria, that went out for the bid would, they would be qualified to bid, so I don't know.
I guess the concern
Comment on
is,
that?
do they have,
This is the first year. The good news, well, 2 points I'd like to make while I have the microphone. The good news is you have 3 candidates who are extremely reputable firms and are more than likely to deliver what you're asking for, and that is not necessarily true of all firms that might have ended up on the list, and many of whom would not have been invited. So Mike and I are clearly comfortable that these 3 have the integrity and the resources to deliver. So I don't think you need to worry about that. The other thing you should worry about is it's excellent that you're spending this amount of time on this decision, because the audit firm is one of your significant responsibilities and your significant hires. They are selected, hired, retained by you to do a service for you as board members. They're not Elaine's hire or Bob's hire or someone else's. So it's good that you're spending this amount of time on that.
Okay, did anyone, the clock's moving, did anyone else want to contribute further points to this discussion, or are you ready for the question? Anyone else have anything to add? Okay, we have a motion to award, in a second, to award the bid to Father Gill, Segali, and Valley in the amount of $231,100. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
Okay, I think we got to do a show of hands. Those ayes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's a no. I'm sorry, 7.
I need the record to reflect that I've abstained from this vote.
Okay, I did not ask about abstentions. Are there other abstentions? And as a chair, I don't vote unless I'm breaking a tie. That's been our practice at the CSSU board. Okay, so it looks like the noes have it, so we need another motion, and we have 2 other qualified bidders.
Yeah, I move to accept the bid of R.H.R. Smith and Company in the amount of $241,600.
Is there a second? Are you ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of awarding the audit services bid to R.H.R. Smith and Company in the amount of $241,600, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? I think I need a count on the yeses. If you're yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, and abstentions 1. Okay. Did that add up? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the bid has been awarded to R.H.R. Smith and Company for $241,600. Okay, thank you, everyone. And 8.0 consent agenda, motion to accept the consent agenda as is, approve it.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Kathy, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Abstentions? Motion carries.
Sure.
Next meeting dates, the community forum is tomorrow. Just a show of hands, how many people expect to be there?
Me too, I expect to be there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And just a reminder that before we move into common topic, Megan, you're going to run this for us, and we do have an executive session. All board members are invited to the executive session. We're going to move into Shelburne, their room, and just have a quick meeting as we do at every one of our CSSU meetings between our CSSU meeting and our local meetings throughout the negotiations process. So we really want to be timely with everything. So Megan, I'm sorry we cut off a little bit of time on your presentation, but it's all yours. We're at 10.0 common topic and 10.1 coordinated school health. Thank you.
I'm going to talk a little bit about coordinated school health, and before kind of jumping into this, coordinated school health is very much wrapped up into some of the questions that have come up in the past around CY and the services that they provide. CY is a part of coordinated school health, and you're going to see that connection in this presentation, but this is not specific to CY. So this isn't looking at SAP or our prevention model. It's really looking at our overall coordinated school health model. And I'm hoping to do two things. One of them is just to help you understand what coordinated school health is and what's its impact on students. So in other words, why are we talking about it? And then talk a little bit about CSSU's approach to coordinated school health and where we have been and where we anticipate going. So first, what's coordinated school health? It's a little bit intuitive. Coordinated school health is coordinating all of the different pieces involved with keeping kids in our schools safe and healthy. And safe, healthy kids come from safe, healthy communities and safe, healthy staff and families and all of that. So there's 8 components of coordinated school health, and I am going to go into detail about what each of them are, so you don't have to squint to see this visual, but it's in your packet. So why do we talk about coordinated school health? Well, the first reason is that the health of our students matters. It matters a lot. We know that the health of young people is really linked to how they perform in school. We also know that if they're hungry, if they're sick, if they're experiencing abuse, they're not going to perform well in school. And health risk behavior, so substance use, violence, physical inactivity, all of these things are linked to academic failure. This isn't new information, but this is why the health of our kids, kind of all of our kids, is really important. But why do we talk about coordination? We have a wide range of supports and services available to kids in CSSU. All schools have those supports. But many of those supports come from legislation that was passed, or they come from grant funds, or they come from rule changes. So what ends up happening is we have a patchwork of services that are, some of them are focusing on kids' wellness and making sure they're eating properly. Some of it's focused on kids' mental health and how they're doing socially and emotionally. But they don't always coordinate. And so if we have a system that is coordinated, then we can think about eliminating gaps and reducing redundancies. Sometimes we have multiple programs that provide a similar service related to school health. Coordination allows us to build partnerships within and outside of schools. We can't make our kids healthy by just looking at what's going on in the school building. We have very strong community support through many arenas, but CY and the partnership that coalition has with the community is one of those ways that we form that. Coordination is also important to build collaboration and enhance communication among public health, school health, other education and health professionals in the community. And coordination helps us focus our efforts on helping students engage in protective, health-enhancing behaviors. So again, none of this is really new, but it's about how do we take all of the different pieces that support our students and bring them to life. So there's 8 components of coordinated school health. The first one is comprehensive health education. So this is curriculum and the teachers, the expert teachers that are able to provide it. Curriculum in a comprehensive health ed system is aligned with the National Health Education Standards, and it addresses topics, healthy eating, drug use and abuse, personal health and wellness. Act 1 that you folks are familiar with that teaches kids about avoiding being victims and sexual abuse in children, that falls under this area of health education. Physical education, school-based curriculum provided so that kids can become healthy, lifelong participants in physical education. School health services, so primarily this is our nursing staff, and they provide health care to the students while they're in the building. They're also responsible for providing referrals, helping kids and families access health care outside of school.
Just before you leave that,
Yep.
do we have a common curriculum, K-8, for health education?
Well, it's really a patchwork. There are a lot of curricula out there, and we'll use pieces of this for their, for various components, and then there might be a better section on prevention around drug abuse in another package, so there's a patchwork.
Do we have a common, like, in the 3rd grade, we address these topics?
Yes.
It's just that how they're addressed is different still?
It's a good question that you raised, because actually, in a few slides, when I talk about some of the work that's going on currently around coordinated school health and kind of assessing where we are, some of our schools are looking specifically at their health education system, because that's not only the curriculum and are we consistent there, but it's also who provides the curriculum, because who provides the curriculum is different in all of our buildings.
Right.
Nutrition services, this is our school lunch program, so that falls under coordinated school health. We don't often think about that, lunch and breakfast, but that is intricately linked to coordinated school health. Counseling, psychological, and social services, so this would be our school counselors, our school psychologists, school social workers, our SAPs fall into this category. These are folks that are here to help with the social and emotional well-being of our students. Healthy and safe school environment, that's our facilities. That's our, is our buildings safe? Are they clean? Are they aesthetically pleasing? All of those things also factor in the coordinated school health. Again, some of these things seem really obvious, and some of them I don't think people are aware that falls under coordinated school health. Health promotion for staff, so wellness programs. Most of your schools have an active wellness committee, folks that are working on making sure the people that teach our students are well and healthy. Lots of reasons why it's important for the people who work in our systems to be healthy. And family and community involvement, and again, this is really key because so much of what makes a student come to school healthy is the community and the family that they exist in outside of this building. So how do we engage parents, how do we engage community members and maintain those connections for resources in addition to just communicating and collaborating. Questions on the components of school health, coordinated school health?
Can I just follow up on Jean's question? So the coordinated curriculum and designated roles, responsibilities in the buildings, are there plans to look at that in a coordinated way?
I think yes. The answer is yes. That's part of why we're doing this work. The schools that are looking specifically at their health education system are asking themselves that question. And I'll sort of explain our work right now. We have a lot of analysis going on at the building level to inform the SU coordinated school health plan, and that information is going to tell us where do we need to focus, where do we need to spend some energy. It may result in us saying we really need to look at our coordinated health curriculum. What is it and who provides it? We're not quite at the point yet where we could clearly identify that from a coordinated school health end. I don't know, Molly, if you...
Yeah, I'm just going to ditto that and chime in too regarding your question, Jean. To answer that better than I did, we have a roadmap for where topics and things might fall across the grade levels, but in terms of personnel to deliver, that varies largely in every building. So I can't say it's a perfect, if you were to look across the issue, every third grade gets WW. It isn't that perfect because of the personnel issue.
There are licensure challenges.
There are some, yes.
I would also suspect this is a topic that there may be some strong community feelings about things being delivered at different grades. It's just kind of interesting.
Yes,
That is. Maybe different than reading or something.
Thank you.
So what's CSSU doing around coordinated school health? So as you can imagine, coordinated school health is big. Each of those 8 components is an initiative or a focus area in and of itself, and we have a lot going on in CSSU. So one of the approaches that we've taken most recently, and I should pause actually and to say this isn't the first time we've talked about coordinated school health in Chittenden South. We've had over the past 2 years, we've had groups of people that fall into those 8 categories, our nurses, our school counselors, our PE teachers, our SAPs, come together various different times and ways to talk about what are the services we currently provide, how do you currently coordinate them within your building, are there gaps, are there ways that you could coordinate better. We've established a community of those folks so that they can hear about what Williston's doing in one area and what Shelburne's doing in another, and can they learn from each other. We also had a group prior to my time come together to look at our wellness policy a number of years ago. So we have had conversations about this. Our most recent conversations are really looking at how do we support and sustain school-based coordinated school health work. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is it is so big that if the SU picked an area or picked a focus and said, here's what we're doing around coordinated school health, that might be exactly the area that Charlotte wants us to talk about, but not the area that's really meaningful to CPU or any other school that you could insert. It also has a lot to do with not only what our school's individual needs, but what are they ready and able to focus on right now. So we've tried to take an approach that takes the good work that's going on in our buildings, supports that work, supports thinking about how to coordinate that better, and then uses the information that we gather from that school-based work to then inform some larger work, because it may be that it's clear that everyone needs to focus on one of these areas. So there are a couple different ways that we've been doing that currently. We've put together a coordinated school health toolkit. One of our schools, Charlotte, actually has been doing, implementing coordinated school health at their level in a way that we thought would be useful for the rest of the SU to take a look at. So I maybe won't show you this. That link is active and you all have access to that if you care to look at it. But that's a toolkit that we developed. That's an online toolkit. And it just helps teams understand if my building wants to undertake coordinated school health and think about how we can connect the dots a little bit better, where do we start? What's the rationale? How do you establish a team? So it has a lot of information about that. We have also dedicated our Medicaid administrative claiming. Not the big amount of Medicaid funds that you get, the smaller amount of Medicaid reinvestment dollars, can be prioritized for coordinated school health in 2 ways, two spending priorities. One of them is just to further the use of the school health index to understand what you need to work on related to school health, and the other area is to fund people to coordinate coordinated school health. So we've set aside a good portion of the CSSU reinvestment funds in the form of mini grants. And again, that goes back to allowing individual schools to say, here's what we want to focus on, here's what's really important to us. We'd like to dedicate some stipends over the summer for a group of educators to come together and talk about, whatever they're looking at. And we've put some parameters around how you apply for those grants, what's the expectation, how are you using the funds. If you're interested in exploring that, that's all on that toolkit site. In addition to the mini grant, we're trying to take our SU resources, sort of human resources and expertise to support individual schools in their conversations. We have a school particularly focused on looking at their model for providing prevention services. So how can we support that? How can we use Christine's expertise in CY and the work of the CY task force a couple of years ago to be able to support that? And we're also interested in exploring, although we haven't established a formal coordinated school health team at the SU level, that is another thing that we're interested in doing. At the end of last year, we met with representatives from, I think, all but one building to come together to hear about this work, to hear about the grants that are available, and to find out if there's interest in having an entity at the SU level. There's a number of things that SU team can eventually morph into. That team could become a decision-making team for how we reinvest future Medicaid reinvestment funds. It could help us shape our curriculum. It could come up with, we'd like to revisit our wellness policy. There's some folks in our school community that want to look at that. So there's lots of different things that group can do, and we're really in the information gathering phase. I want to talk a little bit about the School Health Index. So the School Health Index was created by the CDC. I'm not sure if they created it, but they endorsed the School Health Index. And it's a comprehensive self-assessment tool that looks at all 8 components of the coordinated school health model. And the purpose behind it is to say, how do we know what to focus on in coordinated school health? And it's a process that's pretty well spelled out. And our funding is to prioritize so that groups could come and do a component of the School Health Index. And we would provide training to the team to be able to do that if they needed it. Again, funding for stipends for teachers. But what the School Health Index allows us to do is share results across the SU. It's really hard to come up with a plan for implementing coordinated school health or anything if you don't know where you currently are. So this is an attempt to help us understand where we are. We did talk about whether or not we look at the School Health Index as an SU and realized really quickly that we wouldn't have a good picture if we were trying to have the entity be the supervisory union, because how one school is in an area might be very different from another school. And what we're hoping to do this year, we had 2 schools sign on to do this. We would like to start sharing that information, hopefully get additional schools on board to focus on School Health Index, and then use that data to inform where we want to go next. My last piece. So now to talk a little bit about prevention. Where does prevention fall in a coordinated school health model? We've talked a lot about this specific to CY and the use of our SAPs. But our SAPs are part of a successful prevention model, and there's many different components in that. So a year ago, a little more than a year ago, a group came together, folks from CY, some principals, other stakeholders, to talk about how do we provide prevention in our SU? What's the best practice in how we create a prevention model, and how do we compare to that? So prevention, resilience, intervention, and enforcement, those are all components of effective prevention models. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about that tonight, but we are providing additional support to teams that are really looking at their prevention models. So Jean, you asked the question about where does coordinated school health fall into CY and how we fund that. this represents, and we've talked about this before, but coordinated school health represents the entity through which we can start saying we have a coordinated model. And if how we provide prevention sits in that coordinated model, we can allow a school to look different in how they provide that service from another school across the SU without jeopardizing grant funding. We're not there yet, for all the reasons that I just talked about in terms of completing the school health index, picking our focus areas. We're not at the point yet where we can solidly say, here's our coordinated school health model, this is exactly what prevention looks like in all of our schools, and here's how we can assure grant funders that we are providing all of the components. But that's the direction that we're headed in. There's been some really creative work in some of these teams that are looking at this. We've had initial conversations at the principal level about different ways of thinking about our prevention model. Those conversations are ongoing, but that's really slow, hard work, because what we don't want to do is take dwindling grant funds and further dwindle them by breaking off and doing things differently when we're not quite ready to say that we can assure that everything's being provided appropriately.
Well, I just have to say that we're not immune from having a drug problem at CBU like any other high school, and you certainly can't wait till they show up in the 9th grade to start preventing drug abuse. It's got to start way earlier. I think frankly it's going to start before the 6th grade. So it's got to start earlier. We can't have one of our communities saying, you know, I'd rather have a math teacher, I can't afford drug prevention, and so deal with it when you get to CBU. We can't have that either. It's really super critically important to our kids that this is consistent across the CSSU. Just gonna make sure we don't lose that, so I appreciate you're not risking any of our grant money for
Right,
that.
yes. Well, and I think what's also important about that is it's very easy to say, oh, you know, we can provide each of these components of prevention and we'll parcel it out this way. But if we don't have a really solid understanding of what those components are, we may be making a move to prioritize a different service in place of that without having a really solid structure to sit back on top of. And that's why doing this in a really systematic way that looks at our data is the right way to approach the conversation.
And I'd just like to note that those of board members who just showed up and administrators, you're welcome to ask questions or make comments as well, so.
See, I planned to have my time.
Well done.
Do I get a bonus for being finisher? Are there other questions?
Kathy?
I'm sorry, I may have missed this while you were talking about it, but do we work in conjunction, well, I guess first question is, do our local police forces have that drug prevention program? I forget what it's called, that I'm trying to remember.
DARE.
What is it? DARE. And do our schools work in conjunction with DARE at all?
I actually don't know specific to DARE. I know that our schools work in conjunction with their local law enforcement on a variety of issues. My sense is that that's not universally part of the prevention curriculum for a number of reasons.
When we look at our grades and our achievement and all that, to me, this is so key. The implementation of food accessible to all and readiness is just so key to this. And our students deal with complex lives, their family lives, their school lives, every piece of it. And I just think this is so essential as essential as any of our other curriculum streams. And we're a leader in the state when other schools look at us, or other pieces of my work. Chittenden South is a leader.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the caution that we would offer is not to underestimate the importance of this, because We do have a lot going on, but the success of all of those things that we have going on hinges upon our kids being here and ready to learn. So it is, you know, although we have adjusted our approach so that it's manageable and so that our schools can focus on what's meaningful to them, it's not going away, and I think that message is clear.
I think this is a great effort, Megan. Are there other supervisory unions that have a template or a model that you can use to benchmark your program against?
Not a template, although I would love it if it existed. But there is a sort of Vermont and region, especially Chittenden County, but Vermont-wide emphasis on coordinated school health. You hear that language a lot in the grants that we apply for, and our representative from the Department of Health in Chittenden County has for the past 2 or 3 years run an annual meeting and training around coordinated school health, trying to highlight what individual systems are doing. Some systems approach it by having a coordinated school health coordinator at the SU level who supervises some of this work. So there is the opportunity to work and hear from regional partners to get some information. But I remember having conversations with our Department of Health coordinator asking exactly that question. And everybody's kind of where we are. We're exploring how do we make it work, how do we do it in a way that's unique to our system.
Well, I guess I have a question and a statement. I think there's a public perception that even though the head count in the younger grades are lower, that the resources should be, fiscally, why are our costs going up? But I would argue that especially in the earlier grades, some of those kids fall into higher risk categories. So those classrooms might have 12 kids in them, but you're looking at a third of that class in a high risk category. That's pretty high. So to Jean's point, the intervention, the prevention, especially when it comes to drugs, I would say your benchmarks would be best measured when you start applying K through 3, some of these early intervention programs, food, mental resources, and then look ahead in your own data. Come 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, do you have kids coming to see you? Are they full-time enrolled? Are they having drug problems? How, that's where you're going to get your answers.
Right.
Audience members?
I just have one other thing just to throw in. The whole partnership with the community is really powerful. I work with the food shelf in Williston, and Walter's a great partner with us at Williston Central as far as making sure kids are fed. We try to make sure the families are fed. We try to take care of all the kids in the summer. There's a great St. George organization kind of spread into Williston to send children of poverty to summer camp.
Yep.
And a lot of the communication and identification, of course, we don't, as a not part of the school, we don't know that, so we really rely on the schools to help us find kids who could benefit the most from that. So it's really powerful, I think, in Williston. There are people in the community who really want to help. They really want to do the right things, and it makes it just easier if we work all together rather than, like you said, just joined in.
Exactly.
Is there any emphasis on obesity? What are you doing for child obesity? Is there any focus at all?
Well, I think that's a part of a couple of different components. I think it's part of the physical education component, it's part of the health education component, it's part of the school nutrition program. So that's a really good example of an issue that requires us to be coordinated about how we work on that. It's wrapped up into our staff wellness programs and kind of the behaviors that we model for students. So yeah.
So Megan, when might we hear about this again? Or maybe perhaps it's something that as board members we request in the future that we get a report back on a regular basis or once a year or at a retreat? Or do you anticipate that there might be information for us?
I like the idea of, at the retreat, following up on some of the common topics and saying, okay, so you heard about this in the fall, here's what we've done so far. That really makes sense to me.
And one of the things that I didn't go into and would love, for you to, if you think this is helpful, but I can describe some of the individual projects that are going on in the schools related to this. I kind of just overviewed what's going on, but that might be something that's helpful to hear.
It would be helpful.
It keeps it alive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it might be a place for community members to connect, as Jean said. People do want to be connected to our school, and we want to be connected to the community.
Yeah, and retreat.
So complex.
You would even have time to start thinking about, like, so what are the things that we can do in the community to move this forward, in this particular topic?
And connected to outcomes indicators
Right.
work and so forth. One or two more comments, and then maybe we'll transition right into negotiations, executive session, but comments, questions for Megan?
Well, not for Megan, but if we have a second, I would love Elaine to repeat the AYP good news you had before.
Oh, before we do that, let me just finish up.
I would be so happy to do that.
I just wanted to say, if you're thinking about certain areas to concentrate on, I would be very interested in hearing on drug addiction prevention and when training starts on that in the schools.
Great.
And Elaine's going to share her good news,
I
and
love
I
ending
need
with
to make
good
sure
news.
that board chairs get this from me, so I forget.
Okay. So, as you know, most of our schools, all but Charlotte, are identified for AYP, but this year, the Secretary of Education sent letters to the superintendents, to schools who were recognizing continuous improvement. And Charlotte and Shelburne were recognized for having all of their students 15 to 20% above the state averages in math and reading. CVU was recognized for having met AYP after not having met it last year. They're still identified for AYP, but they met. That's not the usual trajectory. And Williston Central was recognized for two things. One, for increasing 10% in their math subgroup categories. And they were recognized, and I have this, so here's actually the graphic for this. But so in the whole state, here are the schools that are in corrective action. And all of these here, every line
It's a
here.
bar graph.
A bar graph. Every line represents a school that is widening the gap. And just these few little schools here are the ones who are narrowing the gap. And right here's Williston, and look at by how much they narrowed the gap.
All right.
Third best in the state.
I think that's great.
So that's
Good.
good. I love sharing good news. It's really good news all around. I mean, I got a letter really for every school. It was great.
So Elaine's going to share that in our next month's meeting packet. So that
Yes, I
we'll
will
get
put the
that.
graph there.
Right.
What's AYP?
Adequate yearly progress. So Nickelby, 100% of our students proficient by 2014, right around the corner. So it is very difficult. One more year, everybody. We're
It's a
really
lot of hard-
focused
a lot
on the
of hard
good
work,
news
though.
around
A lot of hard work to
closing the
get that
gaps.
happen.
So Megan, thank you very much for that
Thank you, Megan.
presentation.
Yeah,
That was
wonderful.
great. And before we move into executive session, this Yellow Sheets Board chairs, it's the VHI proxy or certificate of authority. So the VSBA, VSA annual meeting, your board chair or whomever the board designates has one vote for each entity to a vote at the VHI meeting or send in a proxy vote. So just make sure that you get this.
I don't know,
Two were sent down in this direction.
I might have,
I was supposed to keep one, sorry.
Okay.
One per board.
One per board, I wasn't sure exactly what it was.
Sorry, I didn't either.
I was just,
I need a
I
motion
know.
to go into executive session for
moved.
negotiations. In a second? Okay, we'll transition right next door.